I was sitting in that cold chair in the lawyer's office. I watched my own children laugh as they forced me to sign the papers committing me to the nursing home. Patricia, my oldest daughter, couldn't hold back her smile as she slid the document toward me. "Come on, Mom. Just sign here and we'll be done. It's for the best," she told me with that fake voice she had perfected over the years. Carl, my younger son, was leaning back in his chair like this was just a formality. "Finally, we can sell the house and divide what little is left," Patricia whispered, thinking I couldn't hear him. But I heard every word, every laugh, every cruel comment they had been making for months. "Poor Grandma Helen," Patricia mocked, imitating her own children's voices. 72 years old and not a dollar to her name. What an embarrassment to the family. Their laughter echoed in that office like daggers stabbing into my heart. I was trembling. Not from fear, but from the rage I felt watching my own children celebrate my misfortune. They had waited years for this moment, thinking they would finally be free of the burden of their widowed mother. I picked up the pen with trembling hands, feeling tears threatening to spill. "Sign here, Mrs. Helen," the lawyer David said to me with a strange smile I couldn't quite figure out. His eyes shined with something that looked like amusement expectation. I didn't understand it at the time. Patricia was already taking out her phone to take a picture. "A historic moment," she said between laughs. "The day Mom finally accepts she can't take care of herself anymore." Carl clapped slowly like he was celebrating a victory. "Look, Mom," Patricia continued with cruelty, "we even picked out the cheapest nursing home we could find. No luxuries for you. A shared room with 3 other old ladies, simple food and visits maybe every 6 months. If that." And her laugh was so cold it made me shiver. Carl added, "And don't even think about calling us crying. We've done enough for you. Now it's your turn to be responsible for yourself." His words hurt me more than any physical blow. I signed the first page, then the second. Every stroke of my name felt like a betrayal to myself. But what other choice did I have? They had done everything possible to convince me I was a burden, that I had nothing left to offer the world, that it would be better for everyone if I just disappeared into that home. "All set, Mom," Patricia said, gathering the papers. "You can go start packing your things. They'll pick you up on Monday." She stood up and didn't even give me a goodbye hug. Carl didn't either. They both walked toward the door, as if I didn't exist anymore. "Oh, and don't bring much," Carl shouted from the doorway. "The room is very small, just the essentials." Patricia laughed as if I had anything of value to bring. But then the lawyer David cleared his throat. "Excuse me, folks, but there is one more small detail I must read aloud before you go. It is a mandatory legal protocol." Patricia and Carl turned around, annoyed. "Now what?" Patricia asked. The lawyer opened a thick folder and pulled out several documents. "I must officially inform you about the liquid assets of Mrs. Helen according to the bank documents she just submitted." My heart stopped for a second. Liquid assets? What was he talking about? "Your mother, Mrs. Helen, currently possesses liquid assets of $120 million US," David read in a clear, strong voice. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia, who was drinking water, started coughing violently. The water had gone down the wrong pipe. Her eyes filled with panic as she struggled to breathe. Carl turned completely white, as if he had seen a ghost. He stood frozen like a marble statue, his mouth open and his eyes wide. What did you say?" Patricia managed to whisper between coughs, her voice breaking. If you have ever felt that your own family turned their back on you when you needed them most, then you know exactly what I was living through. But what my children didn't know was that this story was just beginning, and their cruelty was about to backfire on them in the most unexpected way. To understand why I reached that painful moment, I have to take you back to the past. Back to when I was just an 8-year-old girl who lost her parents in a car accident. I was left an orphan, with no one in the world who wanted me, until my grandmother Vera, a woman with a giant heart, held out her arms and told me, "Come here, my child. From now on, you are my greatest treasure." My grandmother Vera was an extraordinary woman. She was 70 years old when she took me in, but her energy and love seemed endless. She lived in a modest house on the outskirts of town, with a small garden where she grew tomatoes and red roses. Helen, she would tell me while teaching me to water the plants. In this life, the only thing that matters is what you do with true love. Everything else is just noise. She worked as a seamstress and stayed up late into the night just to pay for my school. I would watch her from my bed, bent over her sewing machine, her glasses slipping down her nose, making dresses for the ladies in town. "My child," she would say when I got up to use the bathroom at midnight, "every stitch I make is a prayer for you to have a better future than mine." Meanwhile, my Aunt Claudia, my mother's only living sister, lived in the city with her husband and 2 children. They had money, a big house, new cars, but never, not once, did they offer to help me. When my grandmother asked them to at least buy my school supplies, my Aunt Claudia replied, "Vera, you decided to keep that girl. She's your problem now, not ours." I remember the day my grandmother got sick for the first time. I was 15. I found her passed out on the kitchen floor. I ran to my Aunt Claudia's house, crying desperately, begging her to help me take my grandmother to the hospital. "I don't have time for that," she said without even looking up from her newspaper. "Call an ambulance." That night, while my grandmother was in the hospital, I stayed home alone, scared, not knowing what to do. My Aunt Claudia didn't come to see me. She didn't call to ask how I was, nothing. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Alice, who brought me food and stayed with me until my grandmother came home 3 days later. "My dear," my grandmother told me when she returned, weak but still smiling, "there are people who have a lot of money but empty hearts, and there are people who have nothing but their hearts are full of love. Always remember which side you want to be on." When I turned 18, I met Mark, a hardworking, honest man who fell in love with me at first sight. He was a mechanic. His hands were always stained with grease, but his heart was pure gold. "Helen," he said the day he proposed, "I don't have much to offer you, but I swear I will work day and night to give you the life you deserve." Mark kept his promise. He worked from 5 in the morning until 10 at night, but he always came home with a smile and a kiss for me. When Patricia was born, he cried with happiness while holding her. "This little girl is going to have everything we never had," he whispered in my ear. My grandmother Vera died when Patricia was 3. That day, as I cried unconsolably, she grabbed my hand and spoke her last words. "Helen, in my bedroom closet behind the clothes there is a box. Open it when I'm gone, and always remember, true love never dies. It only changes form." After the funeral, my Aunt Claudia showed up like a vulture. "Now you need our help, don't you?" she said with a fake smile. "But it's too late. You chose to stay with that old woman instead of making a life with us." Her children, my cousins, laughed behind her. "Poor Helen," they whispered. "She's always going to be poor." When Carl was born 2 years later, Mark had already expanded his mechanic shop. "Helen," he would say, holding our son, "these kids are going to have the best education. They'll go to the best universities. They're going to be someone in life." But something strange started to happen as my children grew up. The more money Mark made, the more Patricia and Carl seemed ashamed of our humble origins. "Mom," Patricia said to me when she was 12, "why can't you be like the other moms? Why do you always have to tell those stories about your poor grandmother?" Carl was worse. From a young age, he showed a cruelty that chilled my blood. When he was 10, he found an injured kitten in the garden. Instead of helping it, he kicked it. "The weak don't deserve to live," he told me that day. His words reminded me painfully of my Aunt Claudia. Mark died when Patricia was 20 and Carl was 18. A massive heart attack took him while he was working at his shop. That day my world collapsed. But what hurt the most wasn't losing my husband. It was seeing how my children behaved after his death. "Well, Mom," Patricia told me on the day of the funeral, "now you'll have to learn to live alone. We have our own lives." Carl didn't even wait for the burial to finish before asking me how much money his father had left. It was then that I remembered my grandmother Vera's words about the box in her closet. After all those years, I finally went to look for it. What I found inside changed my life forever. But that was a story my children were about to discover in the most shocking way. After Mark's death, My children began to show their true colors, slowly like snakes shedding their skin. At first, the changes were subtle. Patricia, who lived only 20 minutes away, started visiting less and less. "Mom, I'm just so busy with work," she'd say on the phone. "You know how it is being an adult." Carl moved to the other side of the city just 2 months after his father's funeral. "I need my independence," he said the day he took his things. "I can't live under Dad's shadow anymore." But I knew he just wanted to get away from me, from the memories of our family life. The first signs of exclusion came during the holidays. My 65th birthday came and went without a single call from either of them. When I finally reached Patricia 3 days later, her response was ice cold. "Oh, Mom, it completely slipped my mind. I just have so much going on." But I knew she hadn't forgotten. That same week, I saw photos on her social media of a huge party she threw for her mother-in-law. An elaborate celebration. Elegant decorations, a multi-tiered cake. The whole family was there. For me, her own mother, she didn't even send a text message. The exclusion got worse when they started organizing family gatherings without inviting me. I found out by accident when my neighbor mentioned seeing Patricia and Carl arriving at a fancy restaurant with their families. "Weren't you with them?" she asked innocently. "I thought it was a family dinner." That night I called Patricia. "Oh, that," she said with a nervous laugh. "It was just a quick business meeting. Nothing important, Mom. You didn't miss anything." But I knew she was lying. I had seen the pictures. My grandchildren blowing out candles, everyone laughing and hugging, celebrating what was obviously a family event I had been deliberately excluded from. Carl was more direct in his cruelty. One day he showed up at my house and said, "Mom, we need to talk. Patricia and I have been discussing it. We think it's time you consider moving somewhere smaller. This house is just too big for you." "Move where?" I asked, my heart pounding. "To a small apartment," he replied, refusing to look me in the eye. "Something more appropriate for your financial situation. Dad's gone and maintaining this house must be expensive for you." What hurt wasn't the suggestion itself. It was the way he said it, as if I were a problem he needed to solve for his own peace of mind. "Son," I said, my voice trembling, "this house is full of memories of your father. You were born here." "Exactly," he answered coldly. "They're just memories. It's time for you to live in the present." His words cut me like knives. This was the same boy who had run down these halls, who had played in this yard. But the worst was yet to come. They started a systematic campaign to isolate me. When my friends called the house, Patricia or Carl would answer and tell them I wasn't feeling well, that I was going through a difficult phase, and it was better to leave me alone. "Mom is a bit confused lately," Patricia told my friend Alice, the same neighbor who had cared for me when my grandmother was sick. "The doctor says it's normal for her age. She just needs rest." Alice told me this weeks later, worried about my health. Carl went even further. He started spreading rumors about my mental state to distant relatives. "Mom is starting to show signs of dementia," he told my cousin. "Sometimes she doesn't recognize people. She gets confused. She says things that don't make sense." It was all a complete lie, but he said it with such conviction that people started to believe him. The manipulation escalated when they started controlling my finances. "Mom," Patricia said one day, "we think it would be better if we managed your bank accounts. You know, just to make sure you don't get scammed or spend money on unnecessary things." "Unnecessary things?" I asked, feeling anger boil inside me. "Like what?" "Like those donations you make to the church," Carl answered, "or the food you buy for the neighbors. Mom, you can't afford those luxuries anymore." But I knew this wasn't about protecting me. They wanted to control my money, to make sure I didn't spend their inheritance, as if my own money, earned by my husband's hard work, wasn't mine to spend. The cruelty peaked when they started bad-mouthing me in front of my own grandchildren. One day, I overheard Patricia talking to her 12-year-old daughter. "Look, honey, Grandma Helen is starting to become a burden on all of us. She can't take care of herself, and we have our own lives." "What does that mean, Mommy?" my granddaughter asked. "It means Grandma will probably have to go live in a special place for seniors," Patricia replied, "a place where they can take better care of her than we can." That night, I cried until I had no tears left. My own children were preparing my grandchildren for my disappearance. as if I were an old pet that needed to be put down. They were systematically erasing me from their lives. But what they didn't know was that I had started documenting everything, every cruel conversation, every deliberate exclusion, every lie, because something inside me, the voice of my grandmother Vera, whispered that this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. The moment that changed everything came on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 months before I ended up in that office signing those papers. I was at home when my phone rang. It was my granddaughter, Patricia's daughter. But something was wrong. Her voice sounded like she was crying. "Grandma Helen," she whispered, "can you come pick me up from school? Mom forgot me again." My heart sank. This was the 3rd time this month Patricia had left her waiting. I grabbed my keys and drove over, finding my granddaughter sitting alone on the steps, her eyes red from crying. "Come here, my love," I said, hugging her tight. "Grandma will always be here for you." On the way home, she started talking with that brutal honesty only children have. "Grandma, is it true you're going to go far away and we're never going to see you again?" Her words hit me like lightning. "Who told you that, sweetie?" "Mommy and Daddy were talking last night," she replied in a small voice. "They said they found a place to send you, that it will be better for everyone, especially for them." When we got to my house, my granddaughter fell asleep on the sofa. I went to check her backpack to make sure she had her homework. That's when I found something that froze my blood. Patricia's phone. She had left it in her daughter's bag. The screen lit up with several unread messages. The names on the chat were Patricia Carl and someone named Dr. Miller Geriatrician. My heart pounded. A geriatrician. Why were my children talking to a specialist without telling me I couldn't resist? I opened the conversation. And what I read left me breathless. Carl had written, "Doctor, we need your help convincing our mother she can't live alone. She's resisting the nursing home, and we can't take care of her anymore." The doctor replied, "I understand. It's common for the elderly to resist change. Have you considered a certificate of mental incapacity that would make the legal process much easier?" Patricia had answered, "Is that possible? She's still pretty lucid, but she clearly can't make important decisions for herself anymore. How much would that certificate cost?" My hands were shaking. Carl sent, "Doctor, what we need is for the certificate to state she is a danger to herself, that she can't handle money, that she forgets to turn off the stove, whatever it takes to justify committing her." The doctor replied, "For $1,000 I can provide a medical certificate indicating severe cognitive decline and recommend immediate institutionalization. I just need you to bring her in for a routine checkup." I felt the world stop. My own children were conspiring to have me declared mentally incompetent, buying a fake medical certificate to lock me up against my will. All this time they were executing a calculated plan to get rid of me. I kept reading in horror. Patricia wrote, "Perfect doctor. Once we have the certificate, how long will the admission process take?" The doctor replied, "With the correct documents, you can have her admitted in less than a week. And once she's inside, it will be very difficult for her to get out, especially if you are her only close relatives." Carl added, "Excellent. And about the house and bank accounts, will we need a special document to manage her finances?" The doctor answered, "With the certificate of incapacity, you can petition for full legal guardianship. That will give you total control over all her assets." I couldn't read anymore. My children didn't just want to commit me. They had planned to steal everything I had. They were buying fake documents, bribing a doctor. But what hurt most were the messages where they talked about me as if I were already dead. "Once she's in the home, we can sell the house immediately," Patricia wrote. "I already spoke to a real estate agent. He says we can get at least $200,000. Carl replied, "And the best part is, we won't have to pretend to care anymore. No more mandatory visits, no more calls asking how we are. We'll finally be free." Patricia sent several laughing emojis. "Mom always said family was the most important thing. Well, now she's going to find out how important she is to us." More laughing emojis followed. Just then my granddaughter woke up and saw me crying. "What's wrong, Grandma? Are you sad?" I quickly dried my tears and smiled. "It's nothing, my love. just thinking about adult things. But inside, something had changed forever. My hope that my children could change was gone. Now I knew exactly who I was dealing with. Not ungrateful children, but calculating scammers who had been planning my destruction. That night, after I took my granddaughter back to Patricia's, I made a decision. I remembered my grandmother Vera's words. "My dear, never let anyone treat you like you are less than what you are worth." And I remembered the box from her closet that held secrets my children could never imagine. It was time for Helen to stop being the victim. They had seriously underestimated the useless old woman. They would soon discover that Vera's granddaughter was stronger than they knew, and their perfect plan was about to become their worst nightmare. The war had begun, but they didn't know it yet. The day my children had planned as my judgment day arrived faster than I expected. Patricia called me on Friday morning. "Mom, you need to come to the lawyer David's office on Monday at 2 p.m. It's about some important papers Dad left unsigned." What papers now?" I asked, even though I already knew. "It's complicated legal stuff," she answered evasively. "The lawyer will explain everything. Just make sure you're there on time." She was trying to sound casual, but I could hear the excitement in her voice. That weekend was the longest of my life. I knew Monday was the day they would try to destroy me, but I also knew I had cards up my sleeve they couldn't even imagine. I spent those days preparing, remembering all the lessons my grandmother Vera taught me about strength and dignity. On Monday, I arrived at David's office exactly at 2 p.m. Patricia and Carl were already there, sitting like vultures waiting for their prey. "Hi, Mom," they said, but neither of them got up to hug me. They had that fake look of concern I had seen so many times. "Mom, sit here," Patricia said, pointing to a chair placed in front of the lawyer's desk, like I was on trial. "The lawyer David has some very important documents he needs to explain." The lawyer looked at me with that strange expression again. Was it pity, amusement? "Good afternoon, Mrs. Helen," he said. "Your children have told me about your situation." "My situation?" I asked. Carl cleared his throat. "Mom, we've been very worried about you. You can't live alone anymore. You forget things. You say things that don't make sense." His lies sounded so rehearsed. Patricia joined the attack. "Dr. Miller, you remember you went to see him last week. He explained to us that you have symptoms of advanced cognitive decline." Of course, I had never been to any Dr. Miller. They had fabricated the entire story. "Mom," Carl continued in that condescending voice, "we found the perfect place for you. It's a very nice nursing home, with gardens. You'll be much better off there than alone in that big house. And the best part," Patricia added, "is that we are going to take care of selling the house and managing all your finances. You won't have to worry about anything." The greed in her voice made me sick. The lawyer David spread several documents on his desk. "Mrs. Helen, these are the admission papers for the retirement center, and also some documents that grant legal guardianship of your assets to your children." His words were professional, but his tone made me suspect he knew more than he was letting on. "You just need to sign here, and here," Patricia said, pushing a pen toward me. "It's just a formality, Mom. It's all arranged." Carl was already taking out his phone to record my final humiliation. But then, something unexpected happened. As I raised the pen pretending I was going to cooperate, the lawyer cleared his throat. "Excuse me, Mrs. Helen, but before you sign anything, there is a legal protocol I must follow. I have to officially inform you of the current status of your finances and properties." Patricia and Carl looked at each other confused. "Is that necessary?" Carl asked impatiently. "We already know Mom doesn't have much money. Dad was a mechanic, not a millionaire." They laughed. "Yes, David," Patricia added. "We all know Mom lives on a tiny pension and the few savings Dad left. There's no need to read anything." Their arrogance was sickening, but the lawyer didn't flinch. He opened a thick folder. "I'm sorry, but it is a mandatory legal requirement. When someone is transferring guardianship of their assets, I must read the complete inventory of their estate aloud." "Inventory?" Carl asked with a nervous laugh. "Sir, with all due respect, this is a waste of time. My mother has an old house worth maybe $200,000 and a savings account with a few thousand. Nothing more." "Exactly," Patricia confirmed. "Mom has always been poor. That's why we have to take care of her." Their words were filled with contempt. The lawyer David looked me directly in the eyes. For the first time I saw a small smile form at the corner of his mouth. "Mrs. Helen, do you agree that I should proceed with the official reading of your estate?" His tone made me understand he knew exactly what was happening. "Yes," I answered, my voice firm. "Please proceed." Patricia and Carl sighed, exasperated. The lawyer put on his glasses, took the first document, and began to read. "Official inventory of the estate of Mrs. Helen Ramsey, widow of Mark Ramsey. Real estate properties," he continued. "Main house, valued at $250,000. Commercial building located on Bolivar Street, valued at $2.8 million. Rural land, 500 hectares, valued at $8 million. The silence was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Patricia and Carl were completely frozen, mouths open. What did you say?" Patricia managed to whisper. But the lawyer wasn't finished. "Financial investments," he continued reading. "Stocks valued at $35 million. Government bonds valued at $20 million. Bank accounts in multiple institutions, totaling $65 million in cash." Carl had turned completely pale. His hands were shaking. This has to be a mistake," he stammered. "Mom can't have that money. It's impossible." The lawyer held up his hand to silence them. "Total liquid assets of Mrs. Helen Ramsey, $120 million US. He pronounced every word slowly, savoring the moment. Patricia started to hyperventilate. "No, no, no," she repeated like a mantra. "This can't be real. Mom, where did all this money come from?" Her voice was high-pitched, like a child caught doing something wrong. Carl stood up and started pacing. "There has to be an error in the documents," he said over and over. "Mom, tell them it's a mistake. You don't have that money right. Tell them." But I remained silent, watching their world fall apart. It was fascinating to see the greed that had blinded them for years now turn into pure panic. "But there's more," the lawyer continued, now smiling openly. "According to the documents I have here, Mrs. Helen has also been systematically documenting the behavior of her children for the last 6 months." He pulled an even thicker folder from his drawer. "Documenting?" Patricia asked, her voice trembling. But from the look of terror on her face, I think she already knew. The lawyer opened the folder and began pulling out photos, audio recordings, and conversation transcripts. "We have here," he said, "a rather complete collection of evidence. It shows a systematic pattern of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and attempted fraud." Carl collapsed into his chair as if he'd been shot. "Fraud," he whispered. "What fraud?" "Let's start with this," David said, holding up an audio recorder. "This is a phone conversation between you two recorded 3 weeks ago." He pressed play. Patricia's voice filled the room. "Carl, I already spoke with Dr. Miller. For $200,000, he'll give us the dementia certificate we need. Once we have that, we can commit Mom and keep everything." Then Carl's voice. "Perfect. And once she's locked up, we sell the house immediately. I already have a buyer. We can split the $200,000 and forget that old woman even exists." Patricia had turned green. How did you get that recording?" she stammered. "That's illegal. You can't record us." "Actually," the lawyer replied with satisfaction, "your mother has every legal right to record conversations involving plots to defraud her, and we have many more." He played another recording. Carl's voice. "Once we commit her, she'll be so drugged up she won't even remember her own name. It'll be like she's already dead." Patricia's voice responded with laughter. "What a relief that will be. We can finally live our lives without having to pretend we care about that stupid old woman." Carl stood up violently, knocking his chair over. "This is a trap," he shouted. "You set us up, Mom. You made us think you were poor so you could record us." "A trap," I finally answered with a calm that surprised me. You assumed I was poor because it made it easier to justify your cruelty." Patricia started to cry, not tears of remorse, tears of pure frustration. "But Mom, if you had all that money, why did you live like you were poor? Why didn't you tell us?" "Why?" I replied, looking her straight in the eye. "I wanted to see who my children really were when they thought I had nothing to offer them. And now I know." The lawyer continued, "We also have the transcripts of your conversations with the fake Dr. Miller, including the receipts for the $1,000 you paid for a fraudulent medical certificate." He showed a stack of papers that made Carl look faint. "And here," he continued, "we have the screenshots of your text messages where you discuss how to divide your mother's assets, including this gem." He held up a sheet, where Patricia says, "Once she's in the home, we'll visit her once a year at Christmas, just to keep up appearances." Patricia covered her face. "Stop. Just stop. We don't want to hear any more." But David wasn't finished. "And finally," he said, pulling out one last document, "we have the signed contract with the real estate agent to sell your mother's house, signed 2 weeks before this meeting. A contract where you identify yourselves as the sole legal heirs, even though your mother is alive and mentally sound." Carl started walking toward the door. "I'm leaving. This is persecution. I don't have to listen to this." But the lawyer's next words stopped him. "I'm afraid you can't leave. You see, all this evidence has already been delivered to the district attorney's office. There are criminal charges pending for attempted fraud conspiracy and elder abuse." The silence was absolute. Patricia and Carl just looked at each other. "Criminal charges," Patricia whispered. "We could go to jail for this." "Attempted fraud against the elderly," David explained, "can result in up to 10 years in prison. Falsifying medical documents adds another 5, and conspiracy can add another 7. Carl slumped into his chair. "Mom," he begged with tears in his eyes, "please, we're your family. You can't do this to us. We were just worried about you." But I had waited too long for this moment to feel any pity. The days that followed were the most intense of my life. Patricia and Carl did not give up. Their desperation made them even more dangerous. Now they knew $120 million was at stake. The retaliation began that night. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Carl called me every 5 minutes, shouting, begging, threatening. "Mom, you have to drop those charges," he screamed. "We are your family. You can't destroy your own family over money." "Over money," I replied calmly. "Carl, you are the ones who planned to rob me and lock me up for my money. I am just defending myself." Patricia showed up at my house the next day, her eyes swollen from crying. "Mom," she pleaded from the doorway. I wouldn't let her in. "You have to understand. This was all a misunderstanding. We never really wanted to hurt you. We were just worried." "A misunderstanding?" I asked, holding a copy of the transcripts where she called me a stupid old woman and said she'd be relieved when I was locked up and drugged. "Patricia, I have everything documented. There is no misunderstanding." When they realized begging didn't work, they moved on to threats. Carl started calling all our distant relatives, telling them a distorted version of the story. "Mom has gone crazy," he told my cousins. "She has delusions of grandeur. She thinks she's a millionaire, and now she's accusing us of terrible things." Patricia went even further. She created fake social media accounts and started posting fabricated stories about me. "My mother is suffering from severe dementia," she wrote in community Facebook groups. "She's in a paranoid stage where she thinks her family wants to rob her. It's so sad to see a mind deteriorate like this." But what hurt the most was when they started using my grandchildren as weapons. Patricia told her children that I had become evil, that I didn't love them anymore. "Grandma is very sick," she explained to them. "She's not the same person you knew. It's better to remember her how she was." One afternoon, my youngest granddaughter, the one I picked up from school, ran away from her house and came to mine. "Grandma," she said, sobbing, "Mommy says you don't love me anymore, that you said you never wanted to see us again. Is it true?" My heart broke. "My love," I said, hugging her tight. "That is not true. Grandma will always love you no matter what. But I knew Patricia had poisoned their minds against me. The pressure escalated when Carl started following me. He would show up at the supermarket. He would park outside my house for hours. He followed me to the bank. "I just want to talk to you, Mom," he'd say when I confronted him. "Just 5 minutes to explain our perspective." But I knew he wanted intimidation. He wanted me to feel cornered, scared, alone. Patricia tried a different strategy. She started showing up at my house with distant relatives to pressure me emotionally. "Look, Mom, your cousin Alice came just to talk to you. She's very worried about this family situation." My cousin Alice, who Patricia had obviously filled with lies, looked at me with pity. "Helen," she said, "I understand you're going through a hard time, but destroying your own children is not the solution. Family is the most important thing." "Family is the most important thing," I replied, showing her the transcripts. "Does this look like family love to you?" Alice was speechless. The smear campaign got worse when Carl contacted the local media. He invented a story about a millionaire old woman who had lost her mind and was falsely accusing her loving children. "It's a tragedy," he told a reporter. "Mom was such a sweet woman before the illness changed her." But the reporter was smarter than Carl expected. When I showed him all the evidence, the recordings, the fake doctor's documents, the reporter realized who the real victim was. "Mrs. Helen," he said, "would you be willing to give an interview? This story needs to be told." That night, after the reporter left, I felt more alone than ever. I sat in the kitchen where I had raised my children. I wondered if I had done the right thing. That's when I remembered something that gave me strength. I went to my grandmother Vera's room, which I had kept just as she left it. I opened that box. Inside were the letters, photos, and documents. But there was something else. A letter my grandmother had written for me. To be opened when you feel like you can't go on anymore. With trembling hands, I opened the yellowed envelope. "My dearest Helen," the letter began. "If you are reading this, you are facing the hardest test of your life. Someone who should protect you is hurting you. Someone you trusted has betrayed you. I know it hurts my child, because I went through the same thing." The letter continued. "When I was young, my own sister tried to steal the inheritance our parents left me. She accused me of being crazy, but I learned something. Strength doesn't come from being loved. It comes from loving yourself enough to not let anyone trample on you." My tears fell on the paper. The money I left you, the wealth you now have, it's not just so you can live comfortably. It's so you have the power to defend yourself, to be independent, to never have to beg for dignity. Use it wisely, my child, and remember those who truly love you will never try to destroy you for their own benefit. The letter ended with the words that gave me the strength to continue. "Do not be afraid to be alone, Helen. It is better to be alone with dignity than surrounded by people who only want to hurt you. And remember that I will always be with you in spirit, watching over you." That night I made a decision. I was no longer going to be the passive victim. It was time for Helen Vera's granddaughter to show what she was really made of. The day after reading my grandmother's letter, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer the confused, scared old woman my children tried to create. I was a 72-year-old woman with $120 million solid evidence of their crimes and the determination to get justice. My first call was to David the lawyer. "I want you to proceed with everything," I said, my voice firm. "The criminal charges the civil lawsuits, everything. But I want to do it the right way. No personal revenge, just pure justice." "Mrs. Helen," he replied, "we have such a solid case, it's impossible to lose. Your children will face the full consequences. Are you sure you want to go all the way?" "Completely sure," I replied, "but I also want to do something more. I want to use this to help other seniors who are going through the same thing." My second call was to the reporter. "Mr. Allen," I said, "I am ready to tell my story publicly, but I want it to be more than just a scandal. I want it to educate families about respecting the elderly." That same week, the interview appeared in the local paper. "Millionaire elder exposes children's plot to rob her and lock her up." But what shocked the community wasn't the money. It was the details of the emotional abuse. The reaction was immediate. My phone rang constantly, but now with calls of support. Seniors from all over the city began contacting me, telling me similar stories of children who had abandoned them, grandchildren who only appeared when they needed money. "Mrs. Helen," one 80-year-old woman told me, "you did what all of us have dreamed of doing but never had the courage. Thank you for showing us we can defend ourselves." Meanwhile, Patricia and Carl escalated their desperate attacks. Carl showed up at my house with a cheap lawyer. "Mom," he shouted from the street, "this lawyer says we can sue you for defamation. Drop everything now or we'll take every last cent from you." But his lawyer looked nervous. When I showed him some of the evidence through the window, the man started to sweat. "Folks," I heard him tell my children, "I think it would be better to seek an out-of-court settlement." Patricia tried a different tactic. She started showing up at my church pretending to be the devoted daughter. "Father Michael," she told the priest with crocodile tears, "my mother is very confused. She is accusing her family of terrible things. Could you please talk to her?" But Father Michael was a wise man. When he asked for a private meeting, I showed him all the documentation. "My child," he said, "what your children plan to do is not just criminal. It is a sin. You have my full support." The legal situation moved quickly. The district attorney, after reviewing the evidence, decided to prosecute Patricia and Carl on multiple charges. "Mrs. Helen," he explained, "this case is going to set an important precedent. Elder abuse is rising dramatically. We need to send a clear message that this will not be tolerated." But what really broke my children's resistance was when their own friends and family started to distance themselves. The evidence was so clear and so cruel that no one could justify their actions. Patricia lost several clients at her job. Carl was fired when his boss learned he was being prosecuted for fraud. "Do you see what you've done?" Patricia screamed at me in the supermarket parking lot. "You destroyed our lives. Our children are being bullied at school because their grandmother is a vengeful old woman." "Patricia," I replied calmly, "I didn't destroy your lives. You destroyed them yourselves when you chose to betray me. I only defended myself." Carl tried to blackmail me emotionally one last time. "Mom, if you go through with this, you will never see your grandchildren again. We will cut you out of the family completely." But his threats no longer had power over me. "Carl," I said, "my grandchildren will grow up. They will be able to read the newspapers. They will see the evidence, and they will understand who the real victim was. The truth always comes out." The legal pressure finally broke them. Their lawyer advised them to seek a plea bargain to avoid prison. "Mrs. Helen." David called me one afternoon. "Patricia and Carl want to meet. They are willing to admit their guilt publicly and pay full restitution for emotional damages." "What kind of restitution?" I asked. "They want to return the $1,000 they paid for the fake certificate, pay all legal costs, and do community service in nursing homes for 2 years. But I had an additional condition. I want them to write public letters of apology, admitting exactly what they did and why it was wrong, and I want those letters published in the same newspaper as my interview." The negotiation meeting was surreal. Patricia and Carl, who months earlier were laughing while forcing me into a home, were now sitting across from me like convicted criminals, begging for mercy. "Mom," Patricia said, her voice breaking, "we know what we did was wrong. We were blinded by greed, but we are your children. There has to be a way to fix this." I looked at them, these 2 adults I had raised with so much love, and I felt nothing. Not love, not hate, not even pity, just a deep sadness for what could have been. "All right," I said finally, "I accept the agreement, but with one final condition. You will respect the restraining order I'm filing. I don't want you near me, and if you ever try to manipulate my grandchildren against me again, I will proceed with all criminal charges without mercy." Their letters of apology were published a week later. They were humiliating, but they were just. They publicly admitted to planning to falsely commit me, trying to steal my assets, and emotionally abusing me for months. But my most satisfying revenge wasn't legal. It was moral. I had shown that the elderly are not helpless victims. I had proven that dignity is not negotiable. 6 months after that confrontation, my life had changed. I was no longer just Helen the poor widow. I was Helen the woman who had found a new reason to live. With part of my estate, I did something I know my grandmother Vera would have approved of. I bought an abandoned building and turned it into the Vera Center for Seniors, in honor of the woman who taught me that true love is unconditional. It wasn't a nursing home. It was a place where seniors could come during the day to socialize, learn new skills, receive free legal advice on family abuse, and above all, remember that their lives had value. Mrs. Helen, one 80-year-old man told me, "This place saved my life. I thought it was normal for my family to treat me like a nuisance. You taught me I deserve respect." Every story I heard confirmed that my experience was not unique. Elder abuse isn't always physical. Sometimes it's the son who only calls when he needs money. Sometimes it's the daughter who says, "You can't take care of yourself anymore," just so she can sell your house. My story resonated far beyond our city. I began to receive letters from all over the country. One letter from a 75-year-old woman in Mexico broke my heart. "Mrs. Helen, my son took my house telling me it was for my own good. Now I live in a small room in the back of his house like a servant. But after reading your story, I realize I don't have to accept this. I am going to seek legal help." I decided to expand my mission. With David's help, we established a free legal fund for seniors facing family abuse. We also created a 24-hour support hotline. What's most important, I told the new volunteers, is to let them know they are not alone. Abuse makes you feel like you are the problem. Our job is to remind them they are valuable. As for Patricia and Carl, we lived in separate worlds. They completed their community service working in nursing homes. A friend told me that Patricia at first hated it, but gradually she began to understand the pain she had caused. "There's a lady in the home," Patricia told this friend. "She reminds me so much of Mom. Her kids abandoned her. When I see her so alone, I realize how close I came to turning my own mother into that woman." Carl, I learned, had a deeper crisis. His wife threatened to divorce him when she found out. "I can't be married to someone capable of treating his own mother that way," she told him. He had entered therapy trying to understand how he had become so cruel. My grandchildren, now older, began to seek me out on their own. My oldest granddaughter, now 17, came to visit me at the center. "Grandma," she said with tears in her eyes, "I read everything Mom and Uncle Carl did to you. I want to apologize on behalf of the whole family." "My love," I replied, hugging her, "you have nothing to apologize for. You were an innocent child. The only thing I want is for you to learn from this. Never let anyone make you feel worthless, no matter who they are." A year after the confrontation, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Patricia. "Mom," it began, "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I need you to know, every day I spend here seeing these abandoned seniors, I understand the monster I became. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to know that the work you are doing, helping people, it's beautiful. Dad would be proud of the woman you've become." I cried when I finished that letter, not because I wanted to run and hug her, but because for the first time I recognized a spark of the daughter I had raised. Maybe, with a lot of time, we could find some kind of reconciliation, but it would be on my terms, with my dignity intact. 2 years later, the Vera Center had helped over 500 seniors escape abusive situations. We had passed a new law in our state, making it easier to prosecute elder abuse. And I had found a new family in all those people who had decided they deserved better. "Mrs. Helen," the mayor said during a ceremony, "you didn't just defend yourself. You defended an entire population that had been silenced. Your courage changed laws and saved lives." That night in my house, I sat in the garden where my grandmother Vera used to grow her red roses. The plants had grown enormous. "Grandma," I whispered to the wind, "I hope you're proud. I used the inheritance you left me not just to live, but to live with purpose." I discovered something you probably already knew. The greatest wealth isn't the money you have, it's the dignity with which you live, and the lives you touch. I had learned that family love is not automatic. It is earned. I had learned that age brings wisdom but also vulnerability, and that vulnerability should not be exploited. It must be protected. But above all, I learned that it is never too late to defend yourself, to demand dignity. If there's one thing I want everyone who hears my story to remember, it is this: your value as a person does not decrease with age. Your right to respect does not expire when you turn 70 or 80. And if someone who claims to love you treats you like a burden, remember that the problem is not you. Because at the end of the day, the greatest inheritance we can leave is the example of living with dignity until our last day.